FM Talk.
The sad and actually shocking truth is there's not a Democrat in the House or the Senate that believes border security and immigration enforcement should exist at all. By word and deed, Democrats have made clear their desire to defund both of those critical functions of our government. We also passed the FISA Reauthorization to ensure that the administration is armed with the best possible intelligence to continue eliminating terrorists and defending our homeland. We pray that the Senate can now pass our FISA bill as quickly as possible, and you know they're deliberating over that right now. Now, I just want to say that sometimes the process around here is cumbersome. That's the way this works, but in spite of our razor-thin, historically small majority, House Republicans continue to deliver for the American people. We will continue to do that for the remainder of the year, and that is a large reason why we are going to win the midterms so that the grown-ups can stay in charge here. Take a few questions.
So they have Speaker Johnson speaking on Capitol Hill, and you'll see if you watch the video clip of that Chad Pergram is standing right there getting ready to ask some questions. He is the chief congressional correspondent for Fox News, and we've got him right here on the Annie Frey Show right now. Chad Pergram, thanks for being with us today. What can you tell us? Thank you. What can you tell us about what happened, what was passed today? Did we end the shutdown?
Kind of, sort of.
It's always complicated.
Yes, it is. It is. They are in a much better place, however, than they were. You know, we have had a 70-plus day shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, and some of this could have been resolved a couple of weeks ago, but here's what happened just in the past hour. Is the House finally accepted, after days and weeks of saying they wouldn't accept it, a Senate-passed bill that was passed in a bipartisan fashion twice just a few weeks ago to fund most of DHS for the rest of the fiscal year, everything but ICE and the Border Patrol. And so what had happened, and let me just give you the very sordid legislative history here, is before the Easter Passover recess in late March, the Senate sent over a bill that they thought might end most of the shutdown. Again, they weren't going to fund ICE. They couldn't get an agreement with the Democrats because they don't think they've had sufficient reforms to ICE and Border Patrol, but they were willing to fund everything else at DHS because we had this crisis with TSA and people not getting paid and everything else. So the Senate passed that bill, and House Speaker Mike Johnson came out and just trashed that bill, blamed it on Chuck Schumer, et cetera, said, but it was passed, 100-0 in the Senate. So then they passed another bill to fund all of DHS. Everybody went away. So then you had Mike Johnson in the middle of next week before Easter saying, oh, no, we'll take that bill now. Well, then they never took it. They never passed it. And this is 2.5 weeks ago now. So magically today, and here's what was really going to happen. Mark Wayne Mullen, the Homeland Security Secretary, was crystal clear that these emergency measures where they were moving money around to pay people at DHS was going to expire on Friday. They had no more options. And so the House finally, on a voice vote, not even a roll call vote, grudgingly took the Senate bill after 2.5, 3 weeks of this. Now, what they're still working on, and this will continue for a couple of weeks in the background, is this effort to go around a filibuster and fund ICE and Border Patrol because they can't get that cleared in the Senate. And so they're going to use this special process, which is inoculated from a filibuster called budget reconciliation, and President Trump wants that done by June 1st. And so that will continue to happen in the wee hours of the morning here again, because they do their best work at night. The House passed a framework syncing up with the framework that the Senate approved last week. And so when they get back after another recess coming up, then they will be able, they believe, Republicans, to fund the rest of the Department of Homeland Security and address ICE and Border Patrol and not have to worry about some of the reforms that the Democrats are demanding.
We're listening to Chief Congressional Correspondent for Fox News, Chad Pergram, with the very up-to-the-minute latest on what is developing in Capitol Hill. Was there some White House pressure involved in Speaker Johnson kind of doing an about-face on this particular issue?
Well, this got to be very complicated. Mike Johnson has kind of two masters here. He has to please the White House and has to do what he thinks, the president wants them to do with this very narrow majority in the House. But by the same token, he can't move things, nor would he be able to get the votes for things that aren't popular with his conference. And so that's a challenge. And so, he was getting an awful lot of blowback about that Senate bill. And so that went on for a while. I mean, he frankly twisted himself in a bit of a pretzel, saying he was against it then for it. Then the House was in session the day after he said they were with it, and they didn't pass it. Then they waited another 2 weeks after that. I mean, like I said, this has been, quite a roller coaster just on that issue alone. And what we're waiting for this afternoon, Annie, is whether or not they can pass an extension of what's called FISA Section 702. This is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which intelligence officials and many, national security or minded Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill will say this is essential, because if this program goes dark at midnight, then we're going to be vulnerable to a terrorist attack. Now, let me tell you this. There are some schools of thought here that the program does not actually go dark. So you might say, well, why all this back and forth about why does Congress have to do it? So the special court that oversees FISA, it said that these programs continue, that it still can collect the data that it needs to pick up, under that. But here's the rub. The telecommunications companies, which are given legal immunity by the Congress, might not feel compelled to hand over the information, because there was a court case a few years ago where there was a threat of a fine to Yahoo, a hefty fine, and say, you're not complying here because there's no warrants involved. You don't have legal protection. And so the theory, and I'll underscore this as a theory, is that the program might continue on paper, but not in reality, because if the telecom companies are not forking over the metadata, this is, just who's talking to who, not what's not being said on a telephone call, not, Chad Pergram in Washington, D.C. talking to Annie Frey in St. Louis, or an email coming from Washington to St. Louis. They can't, they're just looking at what's going on back and forth. Now, some people think that's a bridge too far to start with when it comes to privacy and everything else. That's another conversation. But if that, they might lose that legal authority tonight regardless. And there are some people who are very concerned about that in this heightened threat environment, especially with the war in Iran and what happened over the weekend at the White House Correspondents Dinner.
Yes, certainly. Chad Pergram speaking with us right now here on the Annie Frey Show. He is the chief congressional correspondent for Fox News. Were you at that dinner, Chad?
I have never gone, nor have I ever attended an associated event with that. I used to go to the radio TV correspondents dinner, but I'm going to tell you a little secret here. There's a reason why I have not gone to that dinner, and my phone blew up on Saturday night and Sunday morning because everybody said, "Oh, Chad, you were right. I always thought it was a soft target."
Really?
You have too many. You have a lot of journalists, a lot of official Washington. I've been through, the baseball practice shooting, the riot at Capitol Hill, Gabby Giffords getting shot, 2 Capitol police officers being killed here in 1998, another Capitol police officer killed just a few months after January 6th, 9/11. It just didn't feel safe to me, and that's the reason I don't go.
Well, sounds like some wisdom there, certainly after the events of last weekend. I do want to ask you about the moving on the DHS funding, at least in portion. Has this issue held up the business of Congress? Because I'm thinking in my mind, tomorrow is May. There's probably budget conversations that need to be had right now, so that
fiscal year 2027, and we're still working on funding things for fiscal year 2026 when that's been addressed by September 30th of last year. Surely not, Annie. Yes, absolutely. This is the amazing thing. I mean, we were having these conversations about funding the federal government around this time last year for the deadline last September, and they aren't over the hump this time, and so I wonder what it's going to be like this fall. Yeah.
I bet you know exactly what it's going to be like this fall. You've done it over and over again.
Exactly. And again, somewhere in there is there going to be, we have right now, today and yesterday, before the Senate, a Senate committee, you've had Pete Hegseth and Dan Kane testifying here. And one of the questions yesterday at the House hearing was about the cost of the war. They think it's up to $25 billion. The Pentagon specifically is asking for $1.5 trillion, which is about a 44% increase. And that's not including the money that they need for the conflict in Iran. And we haven't resolved the questions with ICE. So how they do this in the fall on the precipice of the midterm elections and not shut down the government again, I don't know.
Oh, well, you'll be there to cover it, and we'll be waiting for you to join us to keep us right up to date with what's happening. Chad Pergram, it's always a pleasure to have you on with us. Thanks for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. The chief congressional correspondent for Fox News, Chad Pergram, right there. We're going to speak with Allie Triolo.